MIB Agents OsteoBites webinar and podcast presents the latest in osteosarcoma treatment, research, innovation, and hope each week. Today we're talking with Dr. Corrie Painter. She is the Associate Director of Count Me In and is a research scientist at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to OsteoBites, everybody. I cannot wait to get started today for two reasons. The first is my snack is Girl Scout cookies. They're Samoas, and I've been saving them up for today. Whew, it's gonna be a great day. And we also, the number two reason is, sorry, Corey, you come after the Girl Scout cookies. We have Dr. Corrie Painter on, and there's so much good stuff to talk about today. Corrie Painter is the Associate Director of Count Me In and is a research scientist at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. She is a trained cancer researcher with a PhD in biochemistry. She completed her postdoc work in cancer immunology. In 2010, she was diagnosed with angiosarcoma, and she has now combined her cancer advocacy and scientific background to engage with patients in order to build and carry out patient-partnered genomics research. Our panel today includes 2021 MIB Junior Board Member Shannon McCormick, 2020 Junior Board Member Ryan Kennington, and Amy Woodcheke, Physician's Assistant and Childhood Cancer Survivor. I'm your host, Anne Graham of MIB Agents. MIB Agents, by the way, is a pediatric osteosarcoma nonprofit dedicated to making it better for our community of patients, caregivers, doctors, and researchers with the goal of less toxic, more effective treatments and a cure for this aggressive bone cancer, which we're going to talk about a really important component of that today. We also make it better for osteosarcoma three ways. We do this through direct patient and family support with many programs to ensure that no one walks alone through this disease, through education, including our annual Factor Conference, OsteoBites, the Testing and Research Directory, which Corrie Painter helped with, and our book, and also through research by funding it, sharing it, and supporting researchers and physicians. With that, Dr. Painter, would you get us started by introducing yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Corrie Painter. As Anne said, I work at an initiative called Count Me In out of the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, where I try to build resources for cancer patients so that we can accelerate the pace at which we make discoveries. And I'll talk all about how we're trying to do this in osteosarcoma as part of my presentation.
Hi, my name is Ryan. In 2014, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma. I had a limb salvaging surgery in my hip to get the tumor removed, and then I completed treatment the next year. Unfortunately, a year after I completed treatment, I had a relapse, one nodule in my lung, and I had that surgery to get that removed. However, luckily, ever since I have been cancer-free. I recently graduated from the University of Delaware last spring, and I am now a member of the Schiffman Lab.
I am Amy Woodcheke. I'm a physician assistant with pediatric cancer for the last 10 to 11 years, and I have a special interest in making it better for osteosarcoma patients, and also am an over 35-year survivor of pediatric cancer.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I am a sibling to an osteo survivor, my older brother Dylan. He was diagnosed in 2013, cured in 2014, and he is now 20 years old, and he has been cancer-free ever since then.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about our initiative at Count Me In. That's called the Osteosarcoma Project. And I just want to put this out in front of the talk. If you want to visit this website that has been made in partnership with people in this community, you can go right now on any device and just type in osproject.org. And you can kind of check out our project as I give you some updates and talk about what it is and what we're hoping to accomplish. So I'm going to give a little bit of context and some background about, again, like what the project is and how it was born and what we're hoping to accomplish. And this is the sixth project that we've launched through this Count Me In initiative, where we want to work with patients no matter where they live in order to make sure that their tumor samples are incorporated into the research world. Because a lot of patients are treated in a community setting, and then their cancer is taken out. It's looked at under a microscope by a pathologist. And then oftentimes the sample just sits in a ball of wax, not really going toward our understanding of what caused that cancer, what's going on in the DNA of that cancer. And so by virtue of the fact that there's not really a way to incorporate most people's tumor samples into research, most patients' tumor samples just haven't been looked at genetically and genomically and molecularly at all. But we live in an era now where we're kind of like all connected. And whether you're in social media or you're not, especially if you have something rare like osteosarcoma, somebody is going to be looking for information and resources, and they're going to end up in social media or on some type of platform where other osteosarcoma patients and family members are probably talking about the disease. And because of that, we're all interconnected in a way that we just never were like 10, 15 years ago. And we can use that and we can leverage that relationship right now in technology in order to reach people that we just wouldn't have been able to reach before. So we decided at the Broad that we wanted to do something. The time was right. And that by being able to connect with patients all over the place at the same time, maybe we could answer this question, this really kind of like audacious question of like, what if we could generate a massive publicly available database, and it would have clinical information from people's medical records, genomic information, both from like their normal or, hereditary DNA, as well as DNA from their tumors, as well as RNA from their tumors, maybe, a snapshot of a stained slide from their tumor and other molecular information, as well as patient-reported data, information that patients can provide just by asking them. And we can stitch all of this together and freely share it within the research community in order to help scientists and doctors make discoveries that would enable the development of new treatment strategies. It's a pretty big goal, right? But that's where we're starting. Like, we live in this new era. Why not? Why not try? So we built one of our first project in metastatic breast cancer, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And we had no idea, what metastatic breast cancer patients thought of this idea, right? It's pretty novel. And we had no idea what they would want to name a project like this. And we didn't know what they would want it to look like. And so our first step was to talk to a bunch of metastatic breast cancer patients and have them really, as subject matter experts, help guide that whole process. And what happened was we made a website, and I don't have it pictured here, but you can check it out if you want at mbcproject.org. And we launched that website in 2015. And we have almost 6,000 men and women from all 50 states in all provinces of Canada who've signed up and said, count me in, I want to be part of this. And they wanted to contribute their samples, and they wanted to contribute their medical records and their voice to help us better understand their disease. And it was just such an incredible success that we were able to branch out and do another project. And the next project we did was in the cancer I was diagnosed with, which is angiosarcoma. I'm 11 years out from that diagnosis, and there's no evidence of disease, but a lot of people listening to this understand what it's like to have a sarcoma, and and we face a lot of the same challenges as the osteosarcoma community. There's just about 300 of us per year. We're scattered all over the place. If you want to do anything, extensive and large scale, we don't all go to one doctor. So even if we did, that still wouldn't be that many people. And so we thought if we could point this platform that we made in a common cancer towards something as exceedingly rare as angiosarcoma, and it worked, then we'd have good proof of concept that maybe we could do this in other spaces as well. Well, lo and behold, we launched the Angiosarcoma Project in 2017, and almost 600 people have joined this project. And it's just been incredible. Like the more rare something is, the quicker you're going to make a discovery, because people just have never looked, right? And there's always something to see, just nobody had ever looked at angiosarcoma. And as a result, we were able to do some practice changing work that I'll talk about in just a minute. So once we're able to get all of this data, we do genomic sequencing of the tumor, whole exome sequencing. We do match sequencing of the germline, that hereditary normal DNA. We extract the RNA out of the tumor. And then we do, kind of look at what the clinical course that the patient was, taking, like what drugs were they taking, what therapies were they on, did they have a relapse, did they have a surgery, and other specific parameters around their experience with cancer. And again, like that patient reported data, which is so critical. And we stitch it all together, and we want to just give it away. So we put it wherever we can put data. We put it in a place called CBio Portal, where anybody can go. This is a place that's just open to the general public. And we have data there. Nothing has your identifiable information. Everything's been stripped from the identifiers, and the type of data from your tumors in your normal DNA are somewhat protected. We just have kind of like the output of our analysis there. And then we have all of the raw data in a place called the Genomic Data Commons, and also at the Broad on Terra. And these require a little bit of a more stringent access control, because it has your like the blueprint of who you are. And so you don't want that necessarily just kind of like floating out for anybody to see. But researchers, bona fide researchers from all over the world can still access it for free, and they can use it to make discoveries. We also want to build, additional portals that would be places where patients themselves can go and peruse the data. And just to FYI, if anybody's interested in helping us think through that, I would love to chat with you offline. So feel free to connect with me. We do have patient reported data housed on our websites, but we could do better. We can make data better too. So I'm just going to put that out there. So just, what have we been able to accomplish in these two projects that we've launched? Like, what's the point? What are we ultimately doing? So we'll start with Metastatic Breast Cancer Project. We've been able to release data that we've generated with all of the sequencing and the clinical abstraction and the patient reported data. And we have this for 400 samples from 300 patients. That means that we have some patients have more than one sample along the trajectory of their experience with metastatic breast cancer. We have some patients where we have 4 samples over a course of time, and you can see what therapies they were on in between. And if you can see what therapies they were on in between, and then look at the DNA after that therapy failed them, maybe you can get a clue as to what happened. Why did their cancer become resistant to that therapy? And that's one of the major goals that we're trying to do in MBC project, as well as all of the other ones, to include osteosarcoma. We've had, we put this data out well before we published on it. And so there's been over 30 other groups that have taken this data and made discoveries and gotten through peer review, and those papers are published. And that was kind of the proof of concept. If you make a bunch of data and you just give it away, would you be able to do a whole lot more than you ever would by yourself? And I think the answer is resoundingly yes. A lot of people can use the same resource, and they can look at it through their own lens. If you have an expert that looks at HER2 breast cancer, they're going to look at the data over like this. But if you have a different person that's looking at ER positive breast cancer, they're going to look at the data a different way, but they're all using that same resource together to make these discoveries. More recently, we've started to prepare our own manuscript, and we've also translated the entire site into Spanish, and we're getting ready to launch that. So we're very excited about that. And then in angiosarcoma, we made some discoveries, like right off the bat with the first 14 people that we had sequencing results for. There was a crystal clear discovery to be made in the data that you could just see on CBio Portal. And I won't go into the details, but suffice it to say that in about 60% of angiosarcoma patients, the cancer itself at a DNA level kind of behaves like melanoma that's caused by sun damage. And as a result, you could, we thought that these patients would maybe respond in a similar way to melanoma, drugs that are sensitive in melanomas, like checkpoint inhibitors or immunotherapies. And lo and behold, we found people that had been put on that by looking at their medical records. Those patients had dramatic responses. We told this to the sarcoma community well in advance of this publication, and they went on to develop several clinical trials. Those clinical trials are already completed and shown that this is actually beneficial. So we went from, launching a study in 2017 to having clinical trials already completed to validate findings in a publication within just a couple of years, that's really kind of the hope of what we're trying to do with all of these projects, is just accelerate that pace that you can discover things. So we're continuing with this project. We've got 83 samples from 62 patients that I misspelled there because that's what I do. And we are analyzing about 200 germline samples to look to see if there are in our hereditary DNA, are there things that act as susceptibility factors for angiosarcoma or other cancers. So these projects really kind of opened up the door for us to build other projects. And you can see we've got one in metastatic prostate cancer, esophageal and stomach cancer, brain cancer. And then most recently, we have this project right here, which is going to be the focus of the rest of my talk, the Osteosarcoma Project. And we launched this last year at the Factor Conference. And so it's been just over a year, and it's been with these people, with Anne, that we were able to actually tell the world that we're open to enrolling osteosarcoma patients. And I just want to pause here. I like having this slide showing everything side by side, because one of these projects is not like the other, right? And one of these projects has a very different look and feel to it as a direct result of working with people within the osteosarcoma community. And this is not a comprehensive slide of everybody that we talked to, but you can see our project advisory council has a familiar face or two from our panel here today, and also some other people from the community. We work with patients, we worked with loved ones and bereaved parents in order to try to build this project so that it resonates within patient community. And it's not one of those things where we've built it and then we're good. It's one of those things where you listening, if you're part of the community and you have ideas for us, we want to hear from you, because it's an iterative process and it should and continue to update over time. In addition to our advisors, we also have a scientific advisory council that is led by Dr. Katie Janeway and Dr. Brian Crompton, who I'm sure many of you know are just incredibly dedicated, brilliant doctors who just want nothing more than to cure this disease. We have a stellar array of other investigators and doctors, as you can see, who are also contributing to the build of this project. And the hope is that together we can build this in a way that's going to have maximum impact for osteosarcoma patients. The key areas for impact. So what do we want to learn and what do we want to do as a result of having patients sign up for the project? These are takeaways that Drs. Janeway and Crompton sent our way. They want to be able to really kind of characterize the molecular subtypes of osteosarcoma. It's a recent, it's been sort of a recent finding that there are these large-scale structural changes to the architecture of the DNA within osteosarcoma tumors. And their copy number changes. So like entire wings of chromosomes are just like copied, and there's more copies of them than there should be. And we don't necessarily know what to do with that. But if you look at that, you can see that there's kind of 6 subtypes that describe what that looks like. We want to look at tumor evolution. So I had alluded to this before, that you can have tumors that may be sensitive to particular therapy for a while, and then all of a sudden they're not sensitive anymore. And we don't necessarily know why that is at all times. But if we can look at the DNA after they stop being sensitive, we might be able to look at mechanisms of resistance. We may also, just by looking at what happens to a tumor as it evolves from like a primary site to a metastatic site, understand the metastatic process. It could be, a tumor itself, it's not one cell that's copied a bunch of times. It's heterogeneous. There's like a bunch of different things going on in there and driving the development of that tumor. And if you can look to see what happens over time and how that tumor evolves, you might be able to find different pivot points that you can really attack that tumor, whether it's at the primary site or through minimal residual disease or in the metastatic setting. And then ultimately, of course, we want to be able to identify new targetable therapies. There's 2 ways to think of this. You can identify things that are happening in osteosarcoma that we may not have known before, for which there's already a drug that's been developed, maybe for a different cancer or maybe even for a different disease altogether. And if we study this disease and we understand all of the pathways that are involved, we may be able to better match to drugs that are already available. Or we may understand a little bit more than we do now in order to specifically develop new drugs and put those into clinical trials and test the efficacy within osteosarcoma patients. So if you want to, so I said this at the beginning of the chat, if you want to come visit and see what this is all about, you can come to the OS Project, so osproject.org, And anybody who's ever been diagnosed with osteosarcoma that lives in the United States or Canada can come join. And what it'll look and feel like is, we're going to ask you to fill out some information, that patient reported data, which I'm going to show you a little bit of in a bit. So complete some surveys, and then there will be a consent form to donate access to your medical records. We'll ask for consent to provide a saliva sample, and then you can opt in or opt out of allowing us to send a sample for a blood collection, and also for us to have permission to go get a little bit of your leftover tissue that might be in a wax ball somewhere in a pathology office, as long as it's not needed for your clinical care. So this is open to, anybody who's been diagnosed. And so if you are an adult, you can join yourself. If your child has been diagnosed, you can help sign them up. We did build out a way for parents to sign their children up. In participation, it's as easy as we could make it. I think, there's always challenges when you say that, because you just never know what other people find challenging. But we worked with patients to try to make the barrier to participation as low as possible. And again, we will send a sample saliva kit. We'll do the requesting of the medical records. We'll send a blood kit sample, and then we will do the rest. And so really the portions that patients do, we try to take the burden off as much as possible. And this is a look at who has signed up, whether it's a patient themselves or a loved one, like a bereaved parent, or a loved one who has lost somebody to the disease, and where they live across the country. And it looks like there's clusters, but I think that's more representation of where the population density of the United States is. And over time, this will fill out more. And we'll be able to see, maybe there are spots where there's a bunch of osteosarcoma cases that have arose over time. And maybe that would be worth looking at from the lens of an epidemiologist. So this is a look at some of that patient reported data that I was talking about, and just what we can learn about the people that are signing up before we do anything, before we get their medical records or their saliva or anything. We can learn a lot about who's actually joining, and what are some unique features about their experience with osteosarcoma. So you can see the blue line right here is the cumulative enrollment of pediatric patients, and the orange is the cumulative enrollment of the adult patients, and they're almost matching here. And you can see, we launched last year and we had a steady uptick, and then, it levels off a little bit, but there's this steady upward trend. And I really attribute people that are in social media, just, making sure other people are aware of the project, for that constant kind of uptick in the enrollment. So thank you, all of you who are sharing about it. This is a look at what the some of the other data looks like, the patient reported data. So you can see right here, we've got age bins for, 5-year, 4-year age bins, or 5-year age bins. And you can see that we have both patients who were pediatric when the onset of their osteosarcoma was in a pediatric setting or an adult setting. And you can see how old they were when they actually, you can see how old they were when they were diagnosed, but you can see that these are adult patients that are signing up for the project, but they were diagnosed with osteosarcoma when they were between the ages of 10 and 14. And so the majority of the people who were diagnosed with the osteosarcoma were, in this bin right here, this age bin right here. But what's really unique about this project is you do have patients that were diagnosed with osteosarcoma across a large spectrum of ages. And so that's something that's pretty unique here. And then we also asked when patients notice their first symptoms with osteosarcoma, and you can see that the majority of people felt symptoms within 0 to 6 months of their actual diagnosis. And the different colors are representative of the age at diagnosis. And so you did have people that had symptoms for over a year before they were actually diagnosed with the disease. We also ask if you or your child's osteosarcoma has ever relapsed, and you can see that there's a distribution of people that have both had relapse and also still have primary only, and hopefully they never relapse, and that you can see it's pretty even distribution in terms of whether they were children or adults when that occurred. And then, so we had been rolling with the project for a year, and all the while seeing, is there more that we can do, and is there a way that we could fund it at scale in order to make sure we can do all of the sequencing. So an opportunity arose through the National Cancer Institute. The NCI had a moonshot grant. It was a really large moonshot grant for $16 million. And we could write it on any of the cancers that we're studying or any of the cancers that we wanted to study. And we thought it might be the most impactful to focus on sarcomas, and in particular, focus on osteosarcoma and leiomyosarcoma. So we wrote this in October of last year, and we had help from many of our advocacy partners, to include MIB agents who wrote a letter of support for this grant. And we were awarded this, which was truly amazing. We were just really beside ourselves, because it just meant that this will be a big deal. It's going to be a big deal for osteosarcoma, but it's going to garner attention from a lot of people in biomedical community who may not necessarily have considered studying osteosarcoma. Once we start releasing data from it, it's just going to be something that a lot of people will see, a lot more people than I think would have seen in other ways. What does it look like? What did the grant look like, and what is it going to enable? Well, this is for both LMS and growing the Osteosarcoma Project. And these are the aims. This is straight out of the grant proposal. So I'm just going to, go through these with you at a high level, but I'm going to be, open to questions if anybody has anything that they want to jot down, and we can go over it. The first aim is to partner with patients, which we've done in osteosarcoma. But again, we're always, just so we're always happy to host a webinar and field questions, or just get to know you if you want to talk more directly with our team. So partner with osteosarcoma and LMS patients to establish working groups, build study materials, and launch the project websites. So aim 1 was largely done even before we wrote the grant for osteosarcoma. We're still working on this for LMS. Aim 2 is to engage and register adults and pediatric patients with osteosarcoma and LMS. And so to this end, what we're looking to do is enroll 1,000 osteosarcoma patients. We're over 10% there, which is great. Aim 3 is to collect the biospecimens and robust clinical and patient-reported data, get those copies of the medical records, obtain the patient-reported data, and then acquire the leftover archival samples. And for osteosarcoma, so far we have patient-reported data on 140 patients, and we have 55 medical records in-house already. Aim 4 is this will be a new function. So we're excited to talk, and this is going to require a lot of conversations with people in the osteosarcoma community. So just know it's coming, like the request to chat with people is coming. We're going to be able to communicate the individual results back to patients. This is not necessarily going to be like a type of genetic report that people are used to. So that's why we're going to need to talk to a lot of people to figure out the best way to deliver the information about their own tumor back to them. And so we have to build that. We have to build this return of results pipeline, and then communicate back the individual and aggregate results, both from the tumor and from the germline. So what does it enable? Again, this grant will enable us to build that return of results pipeline. It'll enable us to study how we engage patients. There's a whole new group that's going to join us called the Engagement Optimization Unit. And again, we'll be in touch with some of these people in a bit, but their whole part of this grant is focused on, are we getting it right? Are we talking and engaging with patients in a way that is inclusive? Are we talking and engaging with patients in a way that makes sense? And are there other things that we could and should do? And so we're really excited to learn about patient engagement, in addition to what we're doing from other people who have complementary expertise in the field. And then, of course, collaborating and sharing with this grant is called the PECGS for Patient Engagement Clinical Genomics Sequencing. It's, kind of a mouthful, but they're going to have several different centers that are doing this. We were one of 2 funded centers this past year, but I think they're going to fund maybe several more. And then it's going to be a full network of patient engagement, and we're going to learn along with them and share best practices. So this is a very complicated slide, but I just wanted to show it at a high level so I can talk you through those parts of the project that happen on the patient side. So the patient comes to the website, they will click Count Me In, they'll complete a survey, sign consent if they want, and then a release form if they would like. And then everything in purple is stuff that our team does. We will get medical records, we'll intake the saliva or blood, we'll get the tissue samples, and so on and so forth until we have data that's linked. I put boxes around this because these things actually need to change as a result of the grant, because this is the method through which we collect saliva and blood and tissue. Now that we're going to be able to return results, we have to make sure that we're doing this under very strict regulation. So we have to do this under CLIA guidelines. And so we're currently, where we are right now with Osteosarcoma Project, is we're currently figuring these parts out. And I wanted to just circle that so you would see where we are. And I can talk in detail, but I won't bore you with that right now. But again, if anybody wants to connect offline, I'm happy to go into so much detail. So our next steps are to build out those pipelines and those processes, and start with all of the sample sequencing, and to engage patients to figure out the best way to deliver information back once we do start that sequencing. And so with that, there's so many people that I want to thank, many of them here to include Anne, of course, and then of course, Katie and Brian, Doctors Katie Janeway and Brian Crompton, and their very special moves here dancing in Japan at CTOS. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I can take questions.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I hope everybody is jumping up and down at this, because this is such a giant step forward for osteosarcoma. If we can all participate, if we can all order our kit, which is so pretty, by the way, like get your kit. And like, I actually am holding this because I haven't done my saliva thing yet and filled and sent it back. but I'm going to do that. But if we need more people to sign up for this project. And I remember our first conversation, Corey, I remember going, this is so important. And I always, when I tell people about, we need more data for researchers, I remember saying this, and I didn't even have in my head that your last name was Painter, but I remember likening it to asking a painter to come over and paint your house, but he doesn't have any paint.
Yeah.
So he moves on to the next job. So it's just like what you were saying there, where having more data will attract more researchers, thus more research going into osteosarcoma, which will then inevitably result in more knowledge, more drugs, more information leads us to better treatments. So, oh my gosh, you guys, please share this, and please get the word out. We really need to inform this project. I think Shannon has a question.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
sit down off my soapbox for just a minute.
One of the questions asked was, how can patient families get the word out for others to participate and count me in, so you can build a robust database?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. It could be as simple as sharing the URL of the website with anybody you know who's been touched with osteosarcoma. It's osproject.org. You can share it in email or through text message or through social media. And it sometimes, like in social media, you can share it with communities that you may not know whether or not they know somebody with osteosarcoma, but ask them to share, ask your networks to share about it too. And then they might share about it, and people that you aren't connected to all of a sudden may become aware of the project, and they might sign up that way. And then also we do have, although I have to talk to Taylor about this, I think we have brochures specifically for the Osteosarcoma Project. And so people in our other projects will sometimes request we send them brochures, and then they like to take them into their infusion clinics or to their doctors and see if they can leave them out. Some doctors are okay with it. Some are like, no, thank you. And, but they, a lot of patients have been successful in being able to distribute information. And so if you're at a sarcoma clinic or at a pediatric clinic, there's a high likelihood that if you are spreading awareness there, that you might also be able to find other families.
It makes a big difference when a patient walks in with that information versus an organization saying, hey, can you share this information? And we actually have started a project now called Osteosarcoma Resources. And it's our book, the Osteosarcoma book. and our brochure, which includes the Osteosarcoma Institute, the Osteosarcoma Project information, and a bunch of little goodies in a little tote. And the idea is that when you're diagnosed with osteosarcoma and you have no idea what world you have just entered, that somebody says, listen, sorry, you have osteosarcoma. Here's some information. Here's a small gift, and we can get through this together. And that's the goal with those exact kits. And our junior board is actually helping us with getting those out and back to their treating institutions. So yes, need more information out there, the better.
Yeah, I have a question. It asks, my daughter donated a saliva sample, and she's wondering, how do we go about sharing a blood sample and access to tumor?
Thank you. So in the consent form, there should have been an opt-in or opt-out of being able to donate blood, both the saliva or both the blood and the tissue. And if you wouldn't mind just emailing us at info@osproject.org, we can look to make sure what was filled out on that consent. And if there was if it was checked to donate blood and tumor, we would be we're in that position where we're trying to figure out how to get all the regulations around being able to collect that blood back and have it clear. So, but we would be able to check and then give you a timeline as to when we would be sending out that blood kit, and then also being able to acquire the tumor sample. So thank you also for joining on behalf of your daughter. Thank you.
Will you be able to conduct specific experiments using biological samples in collaboration with other academic and with industry investigators? For example, looking at certain RNA and metastatic tumor samples.
That's a great question. And it actually it gets to the heart of like why we're doing this in the first place. So traditional collaborations, you would work with people to kind of like either share tissue or share data so that you could make discoveries together. And in this, we generate the data. So we'll do bulk RNA sequencing so that all of the RNA is sequenced. And if we get it from a metastatic setting or a primary, we'll do that. And we'll just give it to everybody for free so that it's not necessarily like a collaboration, but it's just the door is open for those people in, other labs or in industry to take all of the data rather than just like a specific amount of data that you might kind of form as part of a collaboration. So instead of looking at like RNA from like one pathway or RNA from like metastatic lesions, they can have all of the RNA from all of the sequencing that we do.
So there's been a couple questions about what's the prospect of international collaboration?
It's such a good question. And this is the one that I don't like to answer it. So please don't ask me. I'm just kidding. As somebody with a sarcoma, a very rare sarcoma, it brings me great pain to say that we're only open in the United States and Canada for samples to collect the samples. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. It has to, a lot of those reasons have to do with regulations that are in other countries. So it's really difficult to share patient information throughout Europe. There are like laws against it. And so trying to set up collaborations has been really tough, even with other English speaking countries, just based on the lack of ability to actually share information and data, as well as the fact that, patients can't necessarily elect to donate their samples if there's like a single, the NHS, for example, everything is centralized. And so a patient can't necessarily opt in to enable their sample to be used like this. So that being said, all of the data that we do collect here is shared freely all over the world. And so like, I would love to be able to, at a minimum, work with international patient scientists and researchers so that we can make sure everything is harmonized. They collect data, we collect data. And at the end of the day, when we share it, it all has the same format so that you can read it together and make discoveries that way. But I feel it. I'm really, as somebody, like I said, like I know so many people that, with my super rare cancer, and they're in Europe, or they're in Australia, or they're in China, and there's just like still only a handful of us. And it would just be great if we could figure this out in order to, especially in these rare cancers, be able to internationalize.
Okay, I have another question. Were any discoveries made yet with the data that was already gathered?
There's no like discoveries per se, other than just like a snapshot of who has signed up. We haven't been started the actual sequencing of the samples yet. As soon as we do, we will absolutely let the community know. So we'll be back in touch with people who've signed up, for whether they're patient or if they just signed up to learn more, and also through our social media and through our advocacy partners. So as we take the kind of the next steps along the way, we'll keep the community updated as to where we are. So you'll have a better idea and understanding as to when we're getting to different spaces.
How do we share blood samples? And I also want to add something onto it, is when the sample arrives in the lab, how long does the analysis take, and how long does it take for that data to get uploaded?
Yeah, it's a good, both those are good questions. We haven't started shipping out the blood kits yet. Again, it has to do with being able to have all of the regulations in place to be able to do that sequencing. So what will happen is we will ship a kit, and there are two ways that you can get a blood draw. You can either bring it to your normal appointment where you might get a blood draw for, you know, your labs or something like that, or there'll be a Quest voucher in the actual kit, and you can schedule an appointment to get that blood drawn at a Quest facility. And then, Ryan, to your point, what happens then is it gets FedExed back to us over the course of a couple of days. And then we'll spin the sample down and collect the plasma and just freeze the plasma for analysis later. So once we have everything built out, then we'll be able to sequence from the stored banked samples.
You mentioned that now you're working with CLIA and trying to get results out to people. For patients and families that have already sent samples, do they have to resend samples? Probably.
So we've only collected some saliva samples at this point. And there could be and again, this is why we're going to be actively looking for input from your community. But we're going to work with color genomics for the germline portion of this. And so we may be able to work with the saliva sample that's already in-house that they sent, if they sent one, but we may send another consent for patients if they want to get the germline return of results, and that would require another sample being sent in through the CLIA process.
I have a question. What about looking at specific sequences in ctDNA?
We're doing it. That's what the blood's for. So thank you for rating that, whoever wrote that. Yes. So for those who may not know what ctDNA is, it's circulating tumor DNA. And sometimes you can have a tumor that, and actually a lot of the cells in your body will just like shed DNA from the nucleus out into the blood. And some of those cells, if you have a tumor, can shed tumor DNA out into the blood. And so when we do a blood draw, we can look specifically for that tumor DNA in the blood. So that is the reason that we're collecting blood.
What would be the big push, or what could we do as a community to help with that international component? Or is there really nothing that we can do?
Yeah, it's not necessarily coming from our side. It's laws really from that exist within like the European Union. So I just think I think for now it would be good. We'll just focus on the United States and Canada, and then if because we've got a lot of work to do to get everything kind of built. And once we're in a space where we're rolling, we can definitely readdress it. I feel like we've tried, and like I said, because I'm in the same boat with my own cancer, I've definitely I've kicked the tires on this a couple of times, and it just doesn't seem feasible for us in this study just quite yet.
What is the cost for all of this to the patient?
Zero.
Yes.
No cost.
I mean, bears repeating, but then you were saying, and sorry, I was distracted with other questions coming in. The patient families may or may not get back the full. It's not going to look like you're getting it from Foundation Medicine, but for example,
Right.
So yeah. What can they expect to get back?
Great question. We're figuring that out right now.
Okay.
That's kind of like where we are in the discussions. And so we don't, what we need to be careful of is, this is not meant to be like a clinical project where you join so you can get like your next step in your clinical care back. But the return of results is more to do with the fact that if we can see your data, you should be able to see your data as well, right? And so there's a little bit of a kind of a difference in philosophy to what you might expect if you go through foundation medicine. Like, first, we're just not built to do something with a rapid turnaround. It can take years to get through backlog of different, tumors and data elements. And so we would never want anybody to kind of like hold their clinical care to join the project. But that being said, if and when we can sequence, we would want you to have information that we had as well. That's for the tumor sample. The germline sample, because we're working with color, is a little bit different. And we're just at the beginning of those conversations, but I think that would happen more quickly, and you would get, different hereditary predisposition information on the predisposition genes.
Yeah, really exciting. That's so good. So good. Okay, so we have burning questions,
Okay.
starting with Mr. Kennington.
All right, so first one, what other profession would you like to attempt?
So I have two quick answers. One, I would like to be a professional skydiver. I met my husband skydiving, and used to pack parachutes. It's a lot of fun. So I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So I like to do fun things in this world in the time that I have. So, if I couldn't make a living doing that, then my second career would be also a dorky scientist, but I would be studying ALS, because I have lost somebody very special to that devastating disease. I would want to champion that too.
All right, the second question is, what was your first job?
I was I did silk screening for t-shirts when I think I was 13 or 14, and all kinds of fun chemicals flooding my body. So I always wonder, like, did that give me cancer? Silk screening, don't do it unless you have to for a living.
All right, third one is, what's your favorite snack?
I have no other snack that I like more than Ghirardelli semi-sweet chocolate chips. I sometimes mix them with goldfish, and you get the sweet salty thing going on. But they are, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there that it's worth the wait. And I don't care if I gain a lot of weight eating them, because I'm really committed to my daily dose of chocolate.
As are we. We're committed to snacking at MIB. So
Mhm.
having OsteoBites at 3:00 really meant we didn't want to run across anybody's snack time jam. So
I
we
hear you.
combined it.
I recommend it. So I mean, I've dabbled in chocolate chips. I've tasted a lot, and I'm here to say none are better than Ghirardelli. If you haven't had the pleasure, I would run out today and get some Ghirardelli semi-sweet.
I concur. Visited the homeland, the mothership at Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco. Right? Are you with me, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited there.
Yeah. Okay. Amy?
All right. What do you hope for?
So much. I think, in this context, I mean, I want world peace. I want to end hunger. I want all the things. But if I could just do my part to help eliminate pediatric cancer, I would be very happy.
We would love that. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
It would be to have the knowledge to cure pediatric cancers.
And what inspired you to become a researcher?
Oh, a researcher, that, if you really want the honest truth there, it was totally by accident. It was, so I like to tell the story. It's a little long. I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but I'll give the crash course. Terrible high school student right here. Very rebellious. Probably why I'm an adrenaline junkie. Basically on the verge of a dropout. Went to college and only went there to help a roommate that could not make her rent, had no intention of going to college, but went to a party, was the only person there not in school, so took some classes through continuing ed, and all of them happened to be science because that was what it was available, and I fell in love with it. The rest is history. So it was literally because of peer pressure.
Shannon?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay, so the next question we have is, what inspires you now?
All of you inspire me now. every single time I get to talk to a patient, it just, gives me new resolve to do everything I can to make a difference.
Okay, next we have, what's your favorite word?
Onomatopoeia, because what is better? There actually is no word better than onomatopoeia, and I would argue with anybody who, I would actually give a bam and a pow to anybody who thought differently.
I like that. And the last question I have is, what do you need to accomplish your work?
I need everybody here to help me spread the word. That's it.
Okay, on that note, go to osproject.org, stat. Is stat an onomatopoeia? Kind of, right? Like scat. It's almost like a
Could be.
karate chop of a word. Okay, so go to osproject.org. And just wrapping up, I need to announce a giant congratulations to our 2021 Outsmarting Osteosarcoma $100,000 awardee, Dr. Kurt Weiss. He's an osteosarcoma survivor, an amputee, an orthopedic oncologist, a clinician and researcher / rapper. I'm going to add that just because that's what you add to a long list of who you are. And I also want to thank our scientific advisory team led by Dr. Matteo Trucco of Cleveland Clinic and all of our family fund holders. This grant would not be possible without people like you and our family fund holders who support MIB agents research. It matters so much. So thank you to all of those fine people. Next week and for the rest of March, we're taking a break, mostly because I'm going on vacation and I couldn't find anybody else to do this job. In the meantime, you can catch up on our library of OsteoBites videos on YouTube, or you can access them through our website. Also via podcast, found also on our website and anywhere you get your podcasts. Let's see. Also, know that when we come back, April is jam-packed, the most jam-packed OsteoBites month ever. We have the osteo like rock stars, Dr. Chan Khanna, Dr. Jane Yanagawa, Dr. Sumit Gupta, Dr. Inez Lose, and Dr. Daniel Prince. It's going to be great. Good thing I'm going on vacation first. So thank you for joining us today. And of course, thanks to our guest, Dr. Painter, for your advocacy, your work, your dedication, benefiting osteosarcoma patients everywhere. It's going to change osteosarcoma. I know it. I know it. We've got to sign people up. Thanks to our panelists, Ryan, Shannon, and Amy. And that's it, you guys. Thanks for being here. And osproject.org, and we'll see you soon. Be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can view our library of this and all OsteoBites topics and rockstar speakers. You can also listen to OsteoBites via podcast wherever you get your podcast.